The topic of today's shir is the location, the possible locations where the Beis Hamikdash stood, and what's some of the basic evidence that supports the various opinions and theories. Part of why this topic is relevant is, first of all, there are those Yidden, a large group of Yidden that hold that even though there's the famous Rashi that the third Beis Hamikdash is Banayu Meshuchlal and it's going to come Min HaShamayim, however, that doesn't negate the responsibility al pi halacha, al pi nigla, that Yidden have a responsibility to seek the possibility to rebuild it b'dei basar v'dam. Now that's what I just said as the first of all is obviously a very controversial statement. Some people emphatically disagree with this, and they bring the medrash that the Eibishter said, "Banisem Beis Hamikdash, you built me a Beis Hamikdash, v'necherav, you built me another one, it was destroyed. Don't build again until you hear a baskol." However, there are others that bring rayas that there were different points in our history when it looked like there was about to be a possibility, and you find the Nesiei Yisrael of that generation leading an effort to build it, similar to the way Ezra led the effort in Bayis Sheni. So the first thing is, this topic is considered the most relevant to any Yid that sees it as our personal responsibility to put back the Beis Hamikdash that was destroyed b'dei basar v'dam. Let the basar v'dam come and put it back. However, for every Lubavitcher that read through the Rebbe's Fabrengens, heard the Rebbe's Fabrengens, learns the Rebbe's Siches, it's a davar apashat kemat the Rebbe never even mentioned. The Rebbe was kemat never even misyaches to such a yitzugain. By the Rebbe was a davar achi pashut that the third Beis Hamikdash is going to come in ganzen b'derech nisi. In other words, it's in ganzen going to come in Hashamayim. It has nothing to do with us lobbying the state of Eretz Yisrael to allow us to build it, or going to the UN to ask for the rights to restore a Jewish place of worship, like these other groups are busy doing. Rather, by the Rebbe was a davar achi pashut, that it's entirely not a chiyuv by us until the time comes. It's going to be led with Melech HaMashiach, and that's all going to be a tkufa, which is beyond us. We have to work to bring it here, but it's something that we have to wait for it to happen. Now, that does not exempt us from the importance of learning this topic, just as a limud for itself, mitzad the pasuk l'shichnoi sidrishu uvasa shama, that we have a pasuk which tells us there's a chiyuv to know the place, l'shichnoi sidrishu uvasa shama, know the place where the Beis Hamikdash stood. But then there's another thing. The Rebbe would often talk by the Fabrengens that when a person learns something halacha l'maaseh, he learns it much better. So if for all of us it's a davar apasha that we are not going to be the ones to locate the place of the Beis Hamikdash, to build the physical Beis Hamikdash with our physical labor, it's all going to be through our ruchnistic labor of Torah mitzvahs. So what is the practical halacha l'maaseh importance to know exactly where the Beis Hamikdash stood? The exact location. Why is it not enough to know generally speaking? It was somewhere in this area, Har Habayis, maybe that l'shichnoi sidrishu v'asa shama. So part of the answer we can approach this is to attach this to another issue. And that is also an issue which has become over the last 10 years more and more of a hot button topic in Eretz Yisrael. And that is the aliyah onto Har Habayis. Going on to Har Habayis, there are many Yidden that have a burning desire to be as close as possible that one can get to the Beis Hamikdash until Mashiach comes and we're zoiche to see it rebuilt. Until then, they want to get as close as possible. So to them, it doesn't feel sufficient to stand by the Koislam Aravi. Why not go on the Har Habayis? Now, obviously, everybody knows the famous Rambam that the Beis Hamikdash Kedusha loizaza b'mkoima, rather it's b'mkoima in Medes, and just like when the Beis Hamikdash stood, Just like when the Beis Hamikdash stood, one was not allowed to go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and it was an Isser of a Chiyuv Kares. So the same thing is today, that one has to know precisely where the Beis Hamikdash stood, in order that he's not walking in the area which is the Kodesh HaKadoshim, which was off limits, only Achas Bashana, to the one Nefesh, the Kohen Gadol, B'Yom HaKippurim. More than that, a person, in addition to avoiding the area of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, which is a small area, there's the entire area of the Beis Hamikdash, which a person is not allowed to go if he's a Tmei Meis. From the Seirig and inwards, the Seirig, the gate that surrounded the Chel of the Beis Hamikdash, one was not allowed to go B'Tumas Meis. Today we're all Tmei Meisim because we have no Drachim, which are B'Cheskas Tara. So not just do I need to avoid the Kodesh HaKadoshim, I need to avoid the entire area of the Beis Hamikdash with Tumas Meis. However, to clarify, one need not avoid the entire Har Habayis with Tumas Meis, because the Mishnah in Kalim tells us that a person is allowed to go on Har Habayis, even on the original 500 Amas by 500 Amas with Tumas Meis, provided he's not a Tamei b'Tumas Keri. So Tumas Keri, we have a solution. You go to a Kasher and Mikvah, and it's removed. Tumas Meis, there is no solution, but that's not an issue, as long as I'm not in the actual Azara, as long as I'm not in the Makim HaMikdash Mamish, I can be in the entire vicinity of Har Habayis. So again, I say this as an introduction so that we see halacha l'maisa why, even if I hold that the third Beis Hamikdash is Banu Meshuchlo Bashamayim and Yavi V'Yigola Min HaShamayim, that Beis Hamikdash still it's negei halacha to know exactly where it stood, so that I know which areas in Har Habayis retain the Kedushas Hamikdash. Now, the Shalach HaKadosh lived in Eretz Yisrael. He lived in the old city, and someone asked him, we've been through so much in Eretz Yisrael, it changed so many hands. How are you so sure where the Beis Hamikdash stood? Maybe this house that's built in the old city, we know that it was destroyed and rebuilt multiple times. They have, like today with the excavation, they have certain homes that they uncovered 3 layers, which are 3 different periods in the history of the Yidden over there. It was one time people living there, it was destroyed, they built on top. Back in the day when a city was destroyed, there were no dump trucks to just empty out the entire area. They put a couple of 2x4s, put a new floor, and that was the new level. So in the old city, it's a city that's built on top of ruins. So the Shalach HaKadosh was asked, how are you so confident to be in the old city, in the Ir Atik of Yerushalayim? Maybe you are standing in the Makim HaMikdash. So the Shalach answered, there was never a suffix in the location of the Beis Hamikdash. The same way every Yid has no doubt there once existed a Beis Hamikdash, he has no doubt the Beis Hamikdash will be returned, whether it's Aidei Basar V'Dam or Min HaShamayim. Every Yid believes that we are waiting for a third Beis Hamikdash. He says, Kachin Safik B'Makim Beis Hamikdash Ki Hu Zeh. This location is it. What location? We don't know. But this location is it. It was never forgotten even for a moment. From one Malchus to another Malchus, the Messiahs that we had, where the Beis Hamikdash stood, and the knowledge what always remained by the Yidden. However, he doesn't say exactly where is this place that is so clear. All it does say is that he had confidence that it's a well-known place. It's not just somewhere lost in the old city in Yerushalayim. Now, there's multiple shittis. However, for the sake of being concise and clear in this shir, we're going to focus on the 2 main shittis. Now, before we even mention the main shittis, let me just help everybody be a little bit familiar with what we're looking at in the graph. Most people were once in Eretz Yisrael and down by the Kois HaMaravi. The Kois HaMaravi is this area where you see number 2. This is the Kois Amaravi. This area over here is all enclosed by a wall. And we refer to it broadly as Har Habayis. We'll discuss if it's really all Har Habayis or perhaps some other things that went on here. Now, the question is, this is the little area that's exposed today where everybody davens. Over here in this area is where you have the Arab quarter. Where in this broad area did the Beis Hamikdash stand? To point out two big structures and one mini piece that people refer to if you'll ever research this topic further. Over here we have the famous Dome of the Rock. Right, over here you can see it a little bit more clear. The Dome of the Rock, you can see this almost anywhere in Old City, Yerushalayim and beyond. Then you have over here the Al-Aqsa Mosque. According to some opinions, now we're going to focus on two, but let me just throw it out there. How many possibilities? There was someone that compiled a book a number of years ago, and he went through 13 opinions, how it all in this area. Some of the opinions place it more north over here, the most famous over here, which we'll discuss. Then some opinions place it over here, and some opinions over here, and then within this area, a little closer to the eastern wall, a little closer to the western wall, various calculations and arguments to each place. So, according to some, it was by this Al-Aqsa Mosque. According to others, it's by the Dome of the Rock. According to others, it's over here, and according to others, it's over here. For this shir, we're just going to zoom into these two central shittas. One that's known as the central one, Dome of the Rock, and the second opinion, which is considered the southern opinion. The people that hold it was near the closer to the southern wall, and we'll go through some of their reasons. Okay. So, we mentioned that we looked at a wide area, almost looking like a rectangle, as being the Har Habayis. The Har Habayis in the Mishnah and Midas is described more as a square. Chamish me'es amis al chamish me'es amis. 500 by 500. Also, Lahavdil, in Yesifis, where he describes the Har Habayis, he also talks about it, something being more of a square, to the tune of 400 amas by 400 amas, based on the descriptions that he uses. So when did the Har Habayis become this large platform that we saw before? Or to take a look at it over here. How did this happen? This doesn't look like a square, and it's certainly not 500 by 500. Actually, the measurement from this point, which is the southern wall, from this point all the way until here, you're talking about 1,691 feet. That is much larger than 500 amas, even if you'll translate an amma to its largest shear. Put an amma as 24 inches. The maximum we're talking about is a square of 1,000 feet by 1,000 feet. Over here you have 1,700 feet. So how did this happen? Who added this? And what's its status? Again, for the sake of honesty, not everybody agrees with what we're going to say, but I'm going to bring the most popular consensus, what people believe. What people most believe is that this was built by Hurdas. The Gemara in Baba Basra tells us a story, and we'll just recap it in short, is that Hurdas was an Eved of Malchus Beis Chashmonaim, and he killed out all the Chachamim because he was sure they would oppose his kingship. Then Hurdas left Baba Ben Buta in order to take aids from him. He was afraid of Baba Ben Buta to have even any power, so he made sure that he blinded him, and like this he only had an ability to give him aids and would never have the ability to lead a force up that would be in opposition. Hurdas was still worried, what if Bava Ben Buta will use his ruchnistic power to curse him? So he decided to put him to the test, and the Gemara tells us that Bava Ben Buta wasn't able to see, so all Hurdas had to do was disguise his voice. He disguised his voice, came to Bava Ben Buta, and started talking to Bava Ben Buta about the Rasha, Hurdas, about what he did. And Bava Ben Buta says, and what do you want me to do? No, so he says, curse him. And he says, I can't. He tried pressuring him, and he wouldn't. So Hurdas was so impressed with Bava Ben Buta's restraint, he said, if I would have known that all the Chachamim had your level of integrity, your level of restraint, I would have never killed him. What can I do to do tshuva? So the Gemara tells us that at that point, the Beis Hamikdash was approximately 300 years old, the Beis Hamikdash that Ezra built. Now, let's just add an important historical piece. Ezra, when he built the second Beis Hamikdash, most of the influential, affluent Jews did not go up with Ezra. They stayed in Bavel. That was part of the hate of the Yidden, that they weren't ready to leave Golos. They were comfortable. They had their businesses. They were prospering in these 70 years. And they weren't that excited about leaving everything behind and going back to Eretz Yisrael. So Ezra went up with a group, the Chassidish Yidden, maybe the Yidden that didn't have such strong businesses. They didn't have a lot of money. So they built a Beis Hamikdash that was very poor. It was a lot of things were made out of wood. It wasn't gold in a lot of places. So the structure in the first place was built like a poor man's palace. On top of that, take a poor man's palace, and at ages 300 years, it was dilapidated. It was falling apart. So Baba Ben Butta realized like this: what's Hurdus' strength? What is Hurdus known as? Even until today, Herodian built things. He was a master architect, a master builder. He loved it. He was good at it. He was extremely creative. Some of the things that he pulled off, till today, people marvel at it and wonder how is it possible without machinery, and how do the weights support each other, which is a topic for itself, not for now. But Baba Butta recognized the strength in Hurdus, and he tells them, rebuild the Beis Hamikdash. You took out the light of the world, which is the Chachamim. Restore the light of the world, build the Beis Hamikdash. Hurdus liked the idea, and we'll cut it short with the details how he pulled off permission from Rome in an underhanded way. But Hurdus had one idea. If he's going to get involved and he's going to put his stamp on this, it's got to be grand, it's got to be massive. It can't just be rebuilt. It has to be on a different level, entirely different caliber. So according to Moses, let me just sum up what we're saying over here. According to Moses, this wall that we know, that we daven at the Kaislam Aravi, this wall was built by Hurdus. Now, some of the reason that supports it, let me just show you something interesting quickly, I'll skip ahead, is if you take a look, one of, today we won't mention people by name, but there's certain people that build towers and make sure always to put their name, have a certain stamp on it, make sure it's gold and a different, so this is not something new. Hurdus had the similar thing. He wanted everybody should recognize like a landmark. It was Herodian built, Herod's Tower. So what was his sign? One of his famous signs is that all of his structures, he put this border around the stone. He would use this stone, and he would create this border, this indentation that would go around, and you see that by the walls surrounding the Har Habayis. So again, most people believe that it was Hurdus who built it, and it was that story that the Gemara tells us in Baba Basra. Going back a little bit, so how did he do it? So what's assumed to be is that he extended the mountain, and he built it, what the Mishnah tells us, kipin al gabi kipin. He made hollow gaps, and this was in order to, pialacha, in case there's tumas meis over here, and this is now all going to be extended to Har Habayis. How do you make sure that no one is becoming tummy? The mikvahs were outside. How do you make sure that someone walking on the new enlarged platform is not going to be tummy? So they created kippin agabi kippin, because the rules with tumah is that tumah oila adler rakia unless it's stopped by a piseach tefach. Now over here, these kippin agabi kippin is not exactly accurate, because in order to do kippin agabi kippin and make sure that if there's a mace over here, it's not going to be going upwards, you need that the second layer is overlapping, and you have a piseach tefach either over here or over here. Now, to give you an inside view, what we were looking at before, this is till today, you can find this in some of the areas of the Har Habayis, what's known in modern language as Solomon's stable. What they thought it was a stable when they came to destroy the Beis Hamikdash. Here's an inside view of what the kippin al gabi kippin look like. Now, so this is a rough, we're touching on everything superficially, but just to give you an idea of how the Har Habayis was most likely expanded. And that's going to lead us to our next question: which way was it expanded? Where was the original 500 amas by 500 amas? And once we know the area where the original 500 amas was, then we can go on to step 2, which is within that 500 amas, where did the Beis Hamikdash stand, and what's considered Kedushas Ha'azara, and Kedushas Kodesh HaKadoshim, etc. Continuing over here. We'll take the most famous Shita as the Shita of the Radvaz. Now, one of the Medrashim that would seem to support the Radvaz's Shita, like we mentioned earlier, the Radvaz is of the opinion that the Dome of the Rock is Beli Safik, he writes in his Tshuva. Beli Safik, that is the area of Kodesh HaKadoshim. We're going to see the questions on it, but let's bring a medrash that would seem perhaps to give it some sort of support. The medrash in Pirkei that Elazar tells us, Chamisha Asar Dvarim, I'm reading right from the bottom, right over here. Chamisha Asar Dvarim Asidim B'nei Yishmael Lasis Ba'aretz Ba'achiris Hayamim Ve'elohim. Medrash lists 15 things, and then it says Ve'yigdiru Pirtzis Chayim as Beis Hamikdash Ve'yivnu Binyan Beheichel. They're going to build their own structure on the Heichel. So some people point to this. Look at this. This is exactly what the Medrash was talking about. They built a binyan, which is the dome of the rock, right on top of the area as the Heichel. Where did the Radvaz, though, base this on? One of the main things that the Radvaz based his Eidos on was he interviewed many Arabs. Now we know that a Goy has no Ne'emanos. However, if a Goy is Masiach Lefitumai, then there is a Ne'emanos. So the Radvaz spoke to various families of Arabs that have been there all the years, and other people, and everybody pointed to that the Messiah that they have is that this Dome of the Rock is built right on top of the Even HaShasiyah. We know that the Even HaShasiyah was in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, so that gave him confidence, and like we said, he quotes Beli Safik, he has no doubt that that is the area. For another time, for those that want to go through it extensively, if you go through his Chuvas, and especially in the new editions, you'll find there's a lot of questions on his tshuva, and there's various approaches to answer. But this is the most famous topic. You can't discuss the area of where the Beis Hamikdash stood without discussing this tshuva. It's the basics, it's the start of the conversation. Now, we mentioned earlier how the Shalah lived in the old city and said that he's 100% confident that he's not standing on top of the Beis Hamikdash, because the place is Yudua, he doesn't say where it was. To mention a few other people, the Rambam writes in a letter that B'yom Shlishi B'Shabbos, I quote over here, B'yom Shlishi B'Shabbos, Ba'arba Yom L'Yerech Marchesh Mishna Sheish V'Esem L'Yisira, Yatzonu Mi'ako Elalis Yerushalayim, Tachas Hakona, V'nechnasti L'Bayis HaGodo V'HaKodesh V'Spalalti B'Yim. So the Rambam also went up, what seems to be to the place of the Beis Hamikdash. And obviously if he went up, so he had the confidence that he knew where it was, so he knows where he's standing, where he's allowed to be and where he's not allowed to be. Other people, in the times of the Rishonim, it's brought down from one person that recorded different things. He says, Ubetchila, Keshehechrifu Harayim, Lo Hayumayim Es Yisrael Milavi Elav Lispala B'Toich. In the beginning, when the Romans destroyed the Beis Hamikdash, they did not prevent the Yidden from continuing to come and to daven in its area. The Malchi Yishmo, which continued to rule, they allowed the Yidden, Hirshu as Yisrael Lavi Har Habayis, Velivnos by Beis Tefillah. They even allowed the Yidden to have a show there and a place to learn. This is in the times of the Rishonim, 1,000 years roughly after Churban Habayis, and it's described that the Yidden living close by would come up to Har Habayis on the Shalosh Regalim and mispalim b'toichoyim ma'amidim tfilasam keneged tmidim u'mesafim. They would daven mamish by the makim hakarbanis v'alaminig hazen nabu kol yimei malchus yishmol until it was stopped. So you see over here that for a long time there was a Messiah, even way after Churban Habayis, there was a clear Messiah where the Beis Hamikdash stood, and there were Yidden that went up and down.
How do they go if they were tummy?
Like we mentioned earlier, as long as you are not a Tommy B'tumas Keri, you can be on the Har Habayis, just not in the Makim HaMikdash Mamish. He doesn't say that they stood in the Makim HaMikdash.
Okay.
Right? He says they were Mechavim Keneged the Makim where the Mizbeach was. But they got up there, they had a shul there. Here's what the Dome of the Rock looks like inside. It's Kishmoy Keinu, a large dome, a large structure, just built on top of this massive rock, which many believe to be possibly or for sure the Even HaShasiyah. Here you have it from on top. Now, to mention just quickly, without going into it, this rock has a hole inside it. The hole leads to a well. So other people align themselves with this shitta, that the Beis Hamikdash roughly stood here. However, since we know that the Mizbeach HaChitzain was built on top of the bedrock of the mountain, and the Mizbeach HaChitzain had the holes which would go down to the well, so they believe you just have to move over the structure a little bit, and instead of putting, let's bring the laser back, instead of putting A as the place on top of the thing, take E, just move this whole structure down. Here's where the Mizbeach was, put it right over here. However, they would agree that it's roughly in this area. What are some of the questions on this? So there's practical questions, and then there's questions based on a Zoyar and Arizal. To go through some of the practical questions in short, we have various calculations from different Gemaras of how the Beis Hamikdash was built and at what height it was. Now, a few things to bear in mind is the height of the Beis Hamikdash relative to the Sha'arim that enter the Har Habayis area. However, that itself not necessarily is a question because we don't know for sure which walls are really the original Sha'arim. Maybe the wall of the Har Habayis was really somewhere over here. But another important conversation is, we know that the water would flow through from the river, and it would go right through the Azar. That's the way they would clean the Azar. They would open up the water, and all the blood would be washed away. The Mayan would also go directly into the mikvah of the Kohen Gadol. Now the issue is, based on what we see today, what we're able to calculate is, this area, the Dome of the Rock area, is built on the top of a mountain. That part is good. It would make sense the Beis Hamikdash was built on the top of Har Miriah. However, what doesn't seem to match up is the way the water, there would be no real way for the water to have, no practical way, no easy way to explain how the water made it up into the Azar. It doesn't seem to really fit with the description that we know. So what would you say? Now, for that matter, what would it help if you put it here? So the big difference is that this area right over here where the Dome of the Rock is built on, it's solid mountain. It's not mistaber that this is an elevated area. However, this area right over here is clearly, we have evidence, and I'll show you at the end of the shir, this area clearly was much lower down, and it was just rebuilt, like we mentioned earlier in the shir, that when things were destroyed, the way they dealt with it was they would just cover it over, put some cross beams, and that was the new platform. So if we have to lower the Beis Hamikdash, that would strongly support an opinion that the Beis Hamikdash couldn't have stood over here. It's hard to explain that it stood over here because this is also solid rocky area. This area would be the most likely to explain if we care about the level. Now other people say possible explanations to get away from it and to justify their advance. We're just giving the overview, we're touching on it. Another question is as follows. Let's take a look at the Zohar from Parshas Pikudim. The Zohar writes, "V'chol inun beisa kadisha, kulu iskanizu." It was entirely nignas. V'lo yisavidu minayu afilu chad. Nothing of the Beis Hamikdash was lost. V'kadyedar kudsha brichu, v'yoikim lo Yerushalayim al asrei. When the Eibishter will return and rebuild Yerushalayim onto its place, Inon Yesoidi Avni Kadmoin, those original foundation stones, Yedrun Lasrai, are going to return to their place, V'lo Yashlit Buhu Eina Achra. And for the entire duration of Golos, Lo Yashlit Buhu Eina Achra. The Nitzutzi Zohar comments right here and says, Mikan Muchach, from this Zohar is clear. From the fact that the Zohar writes, number one, it was Nignas. It's hidden, it's concealed. Number two, for the entire duration of Golos, the Goyim will have no shlita on any area that's really Beis Hamikdash. Anything that's really Beis Hamikdash. Now, this is not such a stira. This is not such a stira to the Pirkei de Rabbi Elazar that we mentioned earlier. The Pirkei de Rabbi Elazar says that the Goyim are going to build something on the Heichel area. The Zohar is telling you that while it may be, it could be that such a thing is possible, the actual inyanim that are shaykh to the Beis Hamikdash, all those stones are entirely not there. So the Netzutz Zohar says, if so, it's impossible. It's clear. It's certainly not the Even HaShasiyah. Does that mean it's certainly not the place? That's the way most people understand. Right? But he's not saying it's certainly not the place, but he's saying it's certainly not the Even HaShasiyah. Next thing that's brought in is the Arizal. The Arizal lived in Eretz Yisrael, and the Arizal lived in Eretz Yisrael after the Dome of the Rock was built. And the Arizal is recorded by his Talmidim as giving a drasha, al-pi Kabbalah, al-pi Side, how the Eibishter made it that the area that the Beis Hamikdash stands is panoi beli binyan, has nothing built on top of it. So again, the Pashtos from the Arizal, it would seem that it was a davar hapasha to him that the Dome of the Rock is not it, because that would be in simple terms. What else do you call it if you don't call it a binyan? So some people try to make a daichik and say perhaps the Arizal means to say, in other words, we don't have an exact recording how the conversations were. Maybe he was trying to say how it's not really a mosque. It's just a structure, because the Al-Aqsa Mosque is all the way to the southern side. That Dome of the Rock is not a mosque, it's just a structure, creating some sort of cover on top of a stone that people perceive to have some level of sanctity. Either way, so again, you could answer it b'doichik, but b'pashtus it wouldn't support that the Dome of the Rock is the Makim HaMikdash. Another area, and this we started touching on before, let me skip over to the second, and that is the infrared imaging of the area of the Har Habayis. Now, if you try to think for a moment of the Beis Hamikdash, a humongous structure, tremendous structure. The Heichel, the Ulam, was 100 amas by 100 amas with the height of 100 amas. Think about a 15-story building, roughly, right? 15, 20. A 15-story building, width of a 15-story building, length of a 15-story building. You're destroying it. They didn't destroy it with dynamite. They didn't crush it into earth. They hammered away at it. They tried burning it a little bit. Obviously, when you try taking down such a large, strong structure, you end up with huge pieces, like anybody who took some of the tours on the southern side. You see some of those huge bricks thrown down. You have nowhere to move it. So, what would happen when you build on top of it? Common sense would tell you that things don't fall down in the most organized fashion. Bricks fall on top of each other, and there's holes, and there's cavities, there's big cavities underneath it. The one area that you see the most cavities in the earth is this area highlighted right over here. Over here you see tremendous cavities in the earth. In other words, you see that it's clearly a raised level. It was originally lower, and it's not solid inside. Big gaps in the ground, tremendous gaps. That would seem to support that probably something very large and significant stood over here. It doesn't tell you for sure, but probably. Now, could have it been that it was a different tower over here? There were other things on the Har Habayis? Maybe, but it's not so likely this exact place. Those other areas were a little bit over here. So, this is one of the things that point again to support that the Beis Hamikdash was not over here, but rather over here. If you would put it over here, let's go back. This is roughly what it would look possibly it would look like. You're putting the Beis Hamikdash here. It's between the two buildings, so it's like the Zohar said, like the Arizal said, it's Panei B'li Binyan. It's like the Zohar said that everything of the Beis Hamikdash is entirely Skanizu until today. Although there's people digging everywhere in Eretz Yisrael, the Eibush are orchestrated in a way that we have no ability to dig over here, and we'll come soon to a couple interesting details about that. But no matter how much there was in Ishtadlus, no one was able to touch it during the entire duration of Golus. It would make sense there'd be gaps in the ground. However, there is one question. I mean, there's much more than one question. But I'll point to the most obvious question that comes to mind. Everybody learned the Mishnah in Midas. Talks about the Har Habayis being Chamish Me'es Amis or Chamish Me'es Amis. The Mishnah in Midas then goes on to tell us where the Beis Hamikdash stood within the Har Habayis. But the Mishnah doesn't give us exact location. Instead, it tells us that the most empty space was on the southern side. Then the second place of empty space was on the Mizrach side. Third place of empty space was on the Tzafin side, and the least empty space was right over here by the Tzafin side. Now when you move over, if we're going to take it for granted that Hordus is the one that built these walls, so that these walls represent the true enclosure of something that was Har Habayis, and that the question is only which way did he extend it, and according to this opinion, they're going to say that the extension is all the way to the north, then you're going to have a slight issue. The slight issue is going to be, you don't have a big roiv here. How much, do you see so much space on the southern side? If you're going to put the Beis Hamikdash by the Dome of the Rock, you see it very well. How the most empty space was by Durham. Yeah? Most certainly if you put the Mizbeach right over here, you see Durham being a major space. Mizrach, Tzafin, it seems to coordinate a little bit better. But when you put it right over here, you don't see as well the Rubei Min HaDurham. So what are the answer to this? The answer is that halachically, in Mishnah terminology, the word Roiv is not loosely translated as an overwhelming majority. Roiv means it's more. 51% is a Roiv. 50.1% is a Roiv versus 49.9. So the way they're going to create the coordinations over here is, we're going to leave roughly 178 amas this way. From here to here, from Mizrach, now we don't count this area because this is an extension of Bayis Sheni. When the Mishnah is talking about Sheni Loy, that the second place of a major gap was on the Mizrach, the Mishnah Pashta is talking about without this. So Sheni Loy is 177.5, Shlishi Loy is 177, and then Miyuti Min HaMayif. Does it work? I mean, technically you can't say it doesn't work. You have a roiv by a half a amma, but it's really tight. It's not the pashut, the lashon, the way you would understand the Mishnah. That's one of the questions. There's many other questions that are asked about this as well. So now let's, what do you say?
The Ma'ariv here looks much more than the Mizrach.
Again?
The Ma'ariv side looks 3 times more than
Right.
the Mizrach, and it doesn't fit with the Mishnah.
But the Mizrach part, that's because you're looking at this part.
Okay.
This part is not really counted, right? So we only have to focus on this part. So technically you do have it, that's the line over here.
Got it.
The line, right?
Got it.
Okay.
Also, the Mishnah might not be talking about Hordus' extensions either, so it could be that the Mishnah has a certain kind of
But
then it was
Hordus expanded it. If Hordus is the one that built this wall, then Hordus, this wall definitely represents the Har Habayis. It's just a Har Habayis plus. But it's not mistaber that a Hordus would build a wall that would run in middle of the Har Habayis and leave half the Har Habayis out. In other words, if you wanted to create a big Durham sign, if you wanted to create a bigger road, you would have to say that this wall is entirely out of place, was built at a later time, and the real Har Habayis goes into this area. It's not so mistaber if Hordus is the one that built this wall, which is what most people believe. Not everybody, but most people believe that he built this wall. And even this opinion is trying to reconcile the coordinations according to that this wall is a real wall of the Har Habayis. Okay. Let's move on now to just create a quick signal. It's possibly here, it's possibly there. So we understand right away why it's not so simple to go onto Har Habayis. And that's why there's a sign, and we'll see the Rebbe pushed for the sign, and we have a letter where the Rebbe thanks Rabbi Getz for sending it to him, that the sign went up. This is the old sign, this is the new version. Asur lefidin Torah l'chol adam l'ikanas l'shatach Har Habayis mipnei kedushasei. But here comes the question. Let's even say there's much more than the two main opinions that we discussed in this year. Even if there's 13 opinions, there are places on the Har Habayis that according to all opinions, it certainly wasn't there. Why shouldn't you be able to go at least to there? So let's take a look at an interesting mind of the Rebbe right over here. Aksav Yad. The Rebbe writes, Hineni b'chol ha'toikif neged ha'ala al seder hayom shaylas heter aliyah al Har Habayis. I'm against it in the strongest terms. In other words, an entire possibility. 100% against even having the conversation about going on to Har Habayis. And here's the Rebbe's nimuk, the Rebbe's reasoning. Take it from miyad. Laser. Take it from miyad. La'ascholas hashakla b'tayir bazeh. Yalu l'sham kam v'kam. As soon as you start the conversation, the Rebbe says you're opening a can of worms. People are not going to wait for you to come to conclusions. Where is it for sure okay to go? Where is it for sure permissible? Where should you for sure not go? As soon as you start talking about it, there's going to be people going in. People are even going to go to places which is not a suffix, maybe this sheet is right, maybe this sheet is right. It's certainly, according to it's a vadai, that you're not allowed to be there. All the Asharis says that, you're going to tie that. In other words, Rebbe's now moving on. We'll say, we'll put a warning. You're not allowed to go here, you're not allowed to go here. But at least you're allowed to go somewhere close in the Kais Maravi. The Rebbe says, if they'll even come, Yelabu es hayitzrim v'yesifu mispra oilam. It's only going to inflame the fires. Yelabu es hayitzrim. The moment it starts becoming a movement to go on to Har Habayis, and now certain Rabbanim come out, don't go here, don't go here. Not just will people not listen, it will almost encourage a certain rebellion. And therefore the Rebbe wanted it should be miyut, nothing to talk about. Now, to add one more interesting thing, the Rebbe over here in this letter to Rabbi Getz, which was the Rav of the Mekayim HaKadoshim, the Rebbe writes to him, Shu aschem b'miyuchad al simas levavi, the shloyach li hatmunas me'azharis. That's the picture that we saw before of the azhar that you're not allowed to go on to Har Habayis. Then the Rebbe adds an interesting point. Noisav al absura hatoiva mesamachas shenifsiku kol ha'avodas v'chafiris sheish b'hem chashash negia ba'kodesh u'mikdash. So just to touch on this in short, what was going on over here. Later they made svarim with about Rabbi Getz and the strong deliberations that were going on. So just to mention an interesting point relevant to this conversation. Rabbi Getz was under a tremendous amount of pressure to support a movement that would quietly dig beneath the Har Habayis with the goal of uncovering the Mikdash together with the Klei HaMikdash. And the point was that this would show the world once and for all indisputable, unrefutable proof that the Beis Hamikdash once stood here. In other words, take the position, it's not even right to mention it by a shir, but after you mention it, take the position of the UN. The UN Kaviyachol commissioned a group of 200 historians, most respected world historians, that put their stamp that they, with conclusive that there not necessarily was ever a Beis Hamikdash there. Where everybody knows that's a lie. So the goal over here was a nice intention. Let's put the argument to rest by literally uncovering the Klei HaMikdash. We know it's right over here on the Har Habayis. Today we have the machinery to do it. Rabbi Getz went to ask different Rabbanim. Some Rabbanim supported it, provided that he would get certain guarantees that the moment it's uncovered, no one would touch it. Because we're Tmei Mason, we're not allowed to touch it. The Rebbe was strongly against it. I don't know 100% the middle what happened, but what seems to have happened is that the pressure grew stronger than the opposition, the pressure to do it. And they went ahead making this tunnel beneath the Har Habayis. The Arabs found out about it, and the Arabs met them in the tunnel, stabbed one of the people over there, and the situation blew up. Till today, if you'll go to Eretz Yisrael, Chas v'Shalom, Mashiach is not here, and you'll take the Kaisel tunnels, you'll see in one of the areas, you see the beautiful original stones of the wall beneath, you see the largest stones, and then you'll notice one area that's patched up with cement. That area right there is that tunnel that they were creating. They had this underground tunnel beneath the layer. They thought they were going to get to it. Anyways, this is just another example of how Min HaShamayim, they were ma'akiv, that until the time of Mashiach comes, entire place of the Mikdash, like the Zohar says, Kulu iskanizu, it's entirely nignas, and no one will have any ability to touch it. Not the Arabs, not half of the Arabs, not the Yidden are able to touch it. It remains entirely concealed. And that was the Surah Toiva that the Rebbe tells him when Rabbi gets confirmed to the Rebbe that the situation is over. There will not be any more diggings that have a chash negiah b'kodesh v'mikdash. All right.
I don't remember the lashon, but it said the Zohar said that everything was buried. Does that include the Kalim also?
Everything that would be Beis Hamikdash.
So
It
that
doesn't say
would-
clear.
So that would imply that the menorah is there too.
You don't know.
The pashtus.
Whatever left, whatever is left.
What about the mini?
Even though,
What about the mini kaisel that they say is right across the Kodesh HaKadoshim? Is that an indicator of any sort?
so that you're talking about when you go into the Kaisel tunnels.
No. There's the kaisel akatin or whatever they call it. That's supposedly it's in the Arab quarter. It's
So,
right,
but it's right across the Dome of the Rock.
they say
That's
that.
if you believe that the Radvaz's opinion is the Mekubaldik opinion, then that matches up. But other people believe that that's entirely not the place of the Mikdash.
And when the Rambam says "Shenichnasli l'bayis hagadol," what is it referring to?
Well, so some people will say that the Rambam, in the Rambam's time, there was still a Kabbalah. There was a Kabbalah at a certain point, but from then
What structure did it
until
go into?
maybe we have from the same period of time where it says that there was a shul and a Beis Hamikdash that was built on the Har Habayis for the Yidden. Yeah.
If they say that everything from the Kaisel, from the Mikdash, is very neat, namely in Aaron's
Thank you, Rabbi Blau. Tomorrow night will be chavrusa and sushi here. Wednesday night, Rabbi Brown will be giving us here on Kashrus and Achshedim.